Into the depths of offensive futility we go. Where will it stop? I don't think Jeff Grimes knows.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this community, being an everydayer. Just thank you for giving some of your time to this. I really appreciate you for sure. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers commit $5 and get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today over at FanDuel.com. Today's episode, we were talking about the offensive futility and trying to put it into context, just how bad it is and what can be done. We have fans cheering for losses. What side of that are you on? And could that be the last week? Could that be curtain call? We're going to talk about all of that on today's Locked On Badgers, plus a little bit more. Let's start here. I think sometimes we cover the day-to-day so much on this show that we don't zoom out enough. We don't cover just the bigger context of what's happening. I wanted to just take a second and look at this offense, where it stacks up historically, where it is in a context of Wisconsin offenses, Big Ten offenses, national offenses, and then what could be changed? What could be done in the short term, long term? How do you fix this? But let's start here. I think the context matters. Just how bad you are matters. 134th in the country in scoring the offense. 134th in the country in scoring offense. You are ahead of NIU and UMass. That's it. That's all you're ahead of. So you are the worst Power 4 offense in the country. 134th. 111th in third down conversions, 132nd in total offense, 113th in red zone conversions, 123rd in passing offense. Points per drive, 1.13, that's 127th nationally. Yards per play, 4.41, that's 127th nationally. Red zone attempts, you have 10 in 7 games. You have 10 red zone attempts in 7 games. That is 1.4 per game. And then remarkably, when you get there, you also don't cash in. Remember, you are 113th in red zone conversion, so you never get there. And then when you do, you don't cash in. Let's talk 2025 versus 2024. You were down 17% yards per play. So last year was a bad offense. Last year got an offensive coordinator fired. Last year was an offense helmed by the mighty Braden Locke. Last year was a disastrous performance, and people were ready to move on. You've seen a 17% drop in yards per play from last year. Some of that's schedule driven, but last year's schedule was tough. Last year you had Bama. Last year you had Penn State. You had Oregon. Last year's no picnic. You've seen a 17% drop in yards per play from what was decried, from what people couldn't wait to get rid of last year. You've gone down almost 20% in yards per play to this season. You took a bad offense and you made it worse. you took a bad offense and you deconstructed it into more garbage. It's unbelievable how bad this offense is. And when you take a step back and you look at the numbers, you have a 44% drop from last year in offensive success rate, basically drives that end in points. A 44% drop, a 20% drop, almost 20% drop in yards per play. You have no explosives. Plus, you don't have first down success, right? So you have an offense who doesn't get it done on first down, doesn't convert on third downs, also doesn't generate explosives, also turns it over too much. It's a disaster in every way, and all of them feed into each other. You're not doing anything well, and because of that, everything feeds into each other. It's an absolute disaster. Field position isn't helping either. Let's continue going down this path. Why is this so bad? Part of it's field position. When's the last punt block you got? When's the last time the defense set up the offense on the 10-yard line because of a turnover, because of an interception? When was the last punt return that gave you 33 yards in field position? Or the last kickoff return outside of Vinny Anthony housing one against Alabama, which didn't give the offense a boost in field position, right? Because he just scored it. Thank goodness for Vinny Anthony. He's just like, F this. I'm just gonna house this myself because I'm Vinny mother effing Anthony. Outside of that, this offense, it starts with poor field position because the defense doesn't force turnovers, and because the special teams is incapable of generating returns. Then it doesn't do well on first down, and then it doesn't convert third downs, and then it doesn't generate explosives. And that's why you get a drive chart that for the last 2 games has been punt, 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 int, punt, fumble, downs, punt, int, punt, fumble, downs, punt. I mean, it's stunningly bad. for a Power 4 team. For a Power 4 team with some talent. Vinny Anthony's a real receiver. And you have some young talent. I think Lance Mason is a real tight end. And you have a couple highly recruited offensive linemen, and Dylan Jones was a 4-star running back. Obviously, the quarterback injuries hurt, but they shouldn't hurt this much. One of the things we talk about a lot is the quarterback injuries. And I'm like, yes, I get that 100%. Quarterbacks are force multipliers, which is it's kind of a military term, but a force multiplier is something that makes everything around it better. You put it in there and it just increases the potency of everything around it in the ecosystem. That's what quarterbacks are. They're force multipliers. So a good one makes your offensive line better, makes your receivers better, makes your field position better. Absolutely. But Daniel O'Neal last year in FBS at the Division I level as a younger quarterback than he is right now, completed 63% of his passes with a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's worse here. Obviously, competition absolutely matters, but he's significantly worse here than he was at San Diego State. I don't put much stock in Hunter Simmons. Hunter Simmons was a backup FCS quarterback. He's struggling like he should, but Daniel O'Neal was brought in specifically in case Billy Edwards gets hurt. You have somebody where at least the wheels won't fall off. You don't expect him to be Billy Edwards. You don't expect him to be a difference-making quarterback. But you went and got Daniel O'Neal and paid a decent amount for him because you needed somebody in case Billy Edwards got hurt. The offense wouldn't be stuck in the swamp of sadness. And it is stuck in the swamp of sadness. And Atroyu is, who's the horse in that movie? Whoever the horse was. And if you're missing this reference, it's a never-ending story, by the way. I mean, we're that horse, and we're just sinking deeper into the mud. We're not moving. We're going to die in the swamp of sadness with this offense because everything's broken. And the level of utility is incredible. And I don't mean for this just to be a completely negative show, but I think we have to take a second. And if it was any other team, if this was Minnesota, we'd be laughing. Now I'm laughing because I don't want to cry. It's the worst offense I have ever seen in my life from a team that I care about. And I have lived through, as a 49ers fan, Jim Druckenmiller taking snaps. I have lived as a Badgers fan with, Danny O'Brien taking snaps. And, you can go on and on and on. Like, this is the most depressing, uninspired offense I've ever seen in my life as a fan. And it just sucks the life out of the team because you can't score. You don't do anything creative. You don't push the ball. You don't generate explosives. And I think the players are trying, but they're just, an ant can try to get through a brick wall all he wants. He's not going to get through it. There's no answer. So what do you do? How do you fix this? How do you fix this offense right now? A couple things here. Short term, there's not much. I don't think there's much. I will say this. Post Oregon, I'm playing Carter Smith if Billy Edwards isn't healthy. Unless Carter Smith, and I don't know one way or the other. I saw practice in Platteville. He was working on things. But unless Carter Smith or the family, and again, I don't know. I doubt it, to be honest. Having talked to some of the people in his camp, he's a pretty competitive dude. Unless he said, no, absolutely not, I'm done with this place, I'm playing Carter Smith after Oregon. Unless Billy Edwards is healthy, obviously, I want to spark. Listen, freshman quarterbacks play all the time in college football. It cannot be worse than Hunter Simmons. It cannot be worse than Daniel O'Neal at this point. We had 49 passing yards against Ohio State. I'm playing Carter Smith. I'm going to see if at least his legs give us some type of spark. At least his toughness, his competitiveness gives us some type of spark. That's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to play Carter Smith. I'm going to play Eugene Hilton. I'm going to play Gideon Atuka. I'm going to play some kids that might give you a little injection of enthusiasm, of youthful exuberance, and of talent, quite frankly. Carter Smith was a 4-star quarterback. He had committed to Michigan. I'm going to play him if he's willing and he's healthy. And listen, unless Hunter Simmons goes to Autzen and springs the upset, I'm going to play Carter Smith. I think that's short-term what you do. Long-term, if this doesn't get better, you got to find somebody to develop quarterbacks. If that's Guyton, great. If it's not, you got to find somebody else. You have to develop the quarterback spot, and Wisconsin has not been able to do that. So I was a little questioning of Kenny Guyton moving up into that quarterback job. I think his enthusiasm is incredible. I think he's a recruiter. I think he can do a lot for you, but you have to have a developer in that spot. And if by next year into the offseason, Carter Smith isn't ready, you got to find a different developer of quarterbacks. It's too important. You have to have a quarterback guru on this staff. Maybe Guyton develops into that. That'd be amazing. If not, you got to make that decision quickly. And then I think if this doesn't get better, if this where we're at now is how we finish this year with this level of offensive ineptitude. You have to move on from Jeff Grimes. You have to. You cannot have the worst offense in college football and run it back. I like Grimes. I was a little cautious when he came in. Probably not quite as high on him as Justin was, because I saw what Kansas fans said on the way out. But I like some of his multiplicity. I like some of his what he wants to do. But if it's this bad the rest of the year, you got to move on. You cannot run it back if this is how bad it is the rest of the year. We're taking a second here. We're going to come back. Again, appreciate every single one of you. Coming up next, cheering for losses. There are a lot of Badger fans that are there. I'm going to go into both sides of this, where I'm at. Curious what everyone else's thoughts are as well when you get this show. But first, a quick second for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel's incredible. The official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network for a reason. Right now, NFL season's here. College football's here. Major League Baseball playoffs. NBA starts soon. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and you get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down the $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. What do I love about FanDuel? I love every type of betting action I can get. Parlays, futures, teasers, spreads, live in-game betting. So even when the game gets out of hand, you can stay in the action over at FanDuel. It makes watching football even more exciting because you've always got a little something riding on the action regardless of the score. Right now, what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Today's episode also brought to you by Go. Go, formerly known as OpenPhone, a big supporter of the show, and I'm a really big fan of what they do as well. Right now, Go gives you the absolute ultimate tool that helps make a difference in making you money and not missing business calls, and making sure you hear every customer that needs your help. You've heard me talk about it before. Here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or computer. So no more carrying 2 phones around or relying on a landline. Right now, you're going to get every call that your business needs, so you can make every contact your business needs, so you can make every bit of money you're trying to get out of your business, which, need I remind you, that's why we're in business in the first place, to make some money and make a difference. See why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly OpenPhone. Get started free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. And if you've got existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over at no charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. Let's jump back into this. Man, fascinating, kind of, in my opinion, moral dilemma here. We got into this with Justin, Rajiv a little bit on a previous show. A bunch of people in the comment section chimed in, and I thought it'd be cool to kind of rehash it a little bit. And if you look below, join the Locked On Badgers community over at our Discord. Great spot there. Let's talk about this idea of rooting for losses. And I want to start, I disagree with it, right? And I made kind of my reason why, but I want to argue to Justin's point why it makes sense. Why people who are big Badger fans are actually rooting for losses. And it's because mediocrity is often the enemy of progress in sports. Being mediocre is about the worst thing you can do, especially in pro sports where draft picks are involved and all that. But even in college football, stringing mediocre seasons along kind of gets you in this middle ground where, we're squinting to see the success and we kind of see it, but we don't really want to move on, but we're not where we want to be. If you bottom out, if you're really bad, if you go 2-10, if you get blasted every game, you're going to start to create pressure, and pressure, forces change. Pressure moves rivers. Pressure creates electricity. Pressure creates momentum. Pressure creates change. And I think from that perspective, I can understand why people who are diehard Badger fans who live and breathe this program have gotten to the point of it's better if we lose out, where they've gotten to the point where it makes sense if we just the bottom drops out, so we can definitely get the change that I believe we need. And again, I'm speaking from their perspective, and I get that, and that makes me sad. It makes me sad that Badger fans that care so much for this program are in that spot. Again, it's not really where I'm at, but I can understand it. And I think from their perspective, they're rooting for clarity. They're not rooting for humiliation. I was taking notes on the side, and I was trying to think of the best way to sum this up. I think that's what it is. You're rooting for clarity. You're certainly not rooting for humiliation. You're not rooting for players to feel bad. You're not rooting for losses, but you're rooting for honesty. You're rooting for clarity in this situation, which is moving on in their perspective. It's this doesn't work. bottoming out creates the pressure necessary to make the change. And they're not anti-Badger, they're pro long-term winning is what that perspective is. And I get that. I absolutely get that. And again, I don't fully agree with it for reasons I'm going to get into right now. I'm kind of giving you both sides of this, and I would be curious for everyone in the community, where are you at on this? Or have you gotten to the point of apathy where you feel like you're rooting for losses to force change, or are you still kind of where I'm at, where I can never root for the Badgers to lose? I will never root for the Badgers to lose. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why. So that was kind of the reasons why you would root for change. Why would you root for losses to force change? I'm never going to root for losses, even if it would force change, because the losses hit the roster hard, right? The players on the roster have families, they have fans, and a lot of them are young, and they're trying to grind out reps. You're trying to build culture. You're trying to build an identity, and losing doesn't help any of that. Losses, like I said, losses are felt on the campus. They're felt in the fans, in the stadium. They're felt by the families. They're felt by a lot of people that many of whom I've had on the show, and when speaking to the players as the recruits coming into this program, and I can remember vividly every single one of them telling me how excited they were to get to Madison. I'm not going to root for those players to lose. I just personally can't. I don't want to. And I think that, you can demand accountability while also rooting for wins. I think that's where I'm at. That's where I'm falling to. Like, I'm going to demand accountability for this product that isn't good enough, but I'm still going to root for wins because I'm rooting for players inside that building. I'm rooting for people, outside the stadium. Like, businesses are better when this wins. People are more excited. There's more people coming to Madison. It's just a better environment for Madison in general when we win. And I think there's also an element of young players that could be on this roster for next year, regardless of who the coach is. You want them fighting for wins. You want them getting wins so they can start building habits to get out of this mess. Listen, if Luke Fickell were to leave, a lot of players on this team would go. Not all of them would go. There's a lot of players on this roster. I can tell you this for a fact because I speak to some of them. They love Madison, and they're going to be here probably regardless of Luke Fickell or not. And you want those players building winning habits. You want those players fighting the rest of this year, trying to get a couple wins, because that can help going into next year. That can start to rebuild some of what this team is. So that's where I'm at. I get the other perspective as well. I'm incredibly curious where everyone in the community is. When you listen to this show, where are you at on this? Have you even thought about it? Are you at the point where you're rooting for losses because you think it forces change? Or are you rooting for wins, demanding accountability? Is that even a balance you can walk, right? Can you demand accountability if they get some wins? I don't know, but that's kind of where I've settled on this. But I absolutely understand the other side of that perspective. All right, we're going to take one more quick second, talk about the Oregon game a little bit, and some basketball thoughts. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick second for our friends of the show over at Monarch. Monarch is a great friend of this show, something that I personally use. Monarch is like a CFO. It's like a digital CFO to help you get every financial account, business, all your services, whether it's debt obligations, credit cards, whatever it is, 401k, savings, into one spot. So you can see everything in one platform, which makes it easier for you to save money, makes it easier for you to track your money, makes it easier to set your goals. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. It's helped organize my accounts. Again, I'm a visual guy. Seeing everything laid out is incredible. Monarch has helped me do that. Plus, it's helped me recognize some spots where I spend too much money. That is what Monarch does for me. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. You will not regret it. It's a service that I use, my wife used. We use it together. Monarch.com. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Oregon game. And is this potentially a curtain call for Luke Fickell? I'll say this. So, I've heard some conflicting things. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk. We talked a little bit about this on the Locked On Badgers reaction show to the Ohio State game. There has been some pushback from the administration in certain areas, maybe some things kind of leaked, whispered about, things being talked about on the periphery that Luke Fickell is going nowhere this year, which I've said multiple times I agree with. I don't think an in-season firing makes sense. I've said that multiple times. That has been somewhat put out there, I would say, in loose ways. Several reporters have talked about it. It's something I've kind of heard similarly, that he will be the head coach for the rest of the year. And then it's almost a decision at the end of the year. What's going to happen next? Is he going to be the guy in 26? Do they have tough decisions to make? There are a lot of politics that go into this. It's not just about money. It's about a lot of, there's politics, there's egos, there's administration. And there's still people who think Fickell could be the guy with some injury luck, an easier schedule, and some talent infusion. That discussion is happening as well. So there's a lot of layers to this, is what I would say. Could it happen this year? Listen, I'll just say this. Something I heard recently was maybe after Oregon. And after Oregon, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen after Oregon, because you have a bye. That if you were to make, in a hypothetical world, if you were to make an in-season move, the time to do it is absolutely after this week. And if it doesn't happen after this week, it's not going to happen this year. It's not. Nor should it, in my opinion. If you're going to make the move, the only spot it makes sense is the Oregon game, because you have a bye and you have 2 weeks to settle the team, circle the wagons, get the interim in place, figure out a rough game plan, build some juice and some momentum going into Washington. If you think you can do that, you're not going to do that. You were never going to do that after Ohio State. I know some people thought it could happen or wanted it to happen. That never made sense. You were never going to play the number one team in the country with a backup quarterback and an almost inevitable outcome, and then turn around and make a massive move like that to disrupt everything, and then go on the road to Autzen and play the number, what are they, 7 or 8 now after they lost to Indiana, play an absolute juggernaut of a team on the road on the West Coast. You were never going to do that. I think we all have an idea how the Oregon game is going to go. Like, it's probably not going to be pretty. It's probably going to be similar to the Ohio State game. It's probably going to be 40-something to 3, 40-something to 0. That would be the time, if you were to make an in-season move, that would be the time to do it. It'd be after Oregon. You would be able to take a step back during that bye week, refresh, figure it out, figure out who the interim is, and who on this staff, who would that be? It could be Coach Mitchell, who coached previously, was a head coach previously. It could be, I don't think it would be Jeff Grimes, with as bad as the offense has been. You really need all hands on deck offensively. So maybe it's Tressel, maybe it's Matt Mitchell. I don't think there's another alternative, quite frankly, other than those two. And I don't think those two are great candidates, which is why I've reiterated, I don't think it makes a ton of sense in season. I just don't think that makes a ton of sense in season, because you don't have a Jim Leonhard waiting in the wings. You don't have a guy like that who could easily step into that role and fill the leadership. Maybe they get Barry Alvarez to step back in for 4 weeks. I kid. No. No. Paul Christ? No, I kid again. The thing of it is, to me, it continues to not make a ton of sense. I want Luke Fickell to have the rest of this year. I think that's what makes the most sense. I generally like coaches getting 3 years anyway, and I know how bad this has looked, but nothing you're going to do in season is going to fix this. Nothing you're going to do. There's a lot of players on this roster that really like Coach Fickell. They really still look to him as the leader. They haven't lost that. I can tell you that for a fact. I'm sure other players have, but removing him in the middle of this, I don't think fixes anything. And that's why I don't think they'll do it. But if you are a fan and you do think that's the right move, after Oregon is what you want to look for. And if it doesn't happen, then it's never going to happen. All right, let's talk really quick a little bit of hoops. Red and white scrimmage happened. Nick Boyd put on a show. I wasn't there, but again, catching up with people who were there, talking to people who were there, seeing some highlights, and then seeing the stats. Nick Boyd scored 21, and this is what we've been talking about. He's a killer. Talking to somebody who had some conversations with a person on that staff, that's the word they used. And they put an expletive in front of it, but they said he's an effing killer. Nick Boyd is going to be so good for this team this year. I cannot wait for hoops. Literally cannot wait for this basketball season to get started. We have a preview tomorrow coming up. Look for that. We have a superlative show coming up for basketball. I think this is going to be a really good year. And one of the biggest questions we're going to have to see is what this rotation looks like. What does the 6 through 10 look like? We know the starters, but how long will those starters play? How many minutes is Austin Rapp getting, right? What is Andrew Rohde getting? Can Janicki break into those minutes a little bit? Can Braden Carrington break into those minutes a little bit? How many of the freshmen are going to play? Can Hayden Jones carve out a role? Cannot wait for this year's hoops team. And I would say that even if football was going better, because I think this is going to be an exciting basketball team that Greg Gard has put together. Offensively, it's going to be unique. It's going to be skilled. I think it's going to be explosive. But also just because football has been so rough, basketball is going to be a palate cleanser. I think that's his entire fan base needs. And a hat off to Greg Gard for everything he has done this offseason. I think he has reloaded, which is hard to do considering you lost a John Tonje, a second-team All-American. But I think he's reloaded, and I think this team is ready to rock and roll. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Badgers as always on Wisconsin. Appreciate you so much. When you're done here, go check out our Locked On Badgers Discord. Again, great Badgers discussion, food, beer, Packers, everything in between. It's free. It's no politics. It's no Gophers on Wisconsin, and we will talk to all of you later. Also, go check out our Locked On Conference shows, Big Ten Squad shows, where we get together. Every Locked On host from the Big Ten gets together and we chop it up. Everything that happened in the week, Big Ten on Wisconsin, and we will talk later.